If there is only one thing you need to learn and understand about Magna Carta 1215, it's this. Magna Carta 1215 is the sole peaceful means known to humankind by which the rights of the weakest, most innocent citizens can prevail over a massive, potentially corrupt and oppressive state power. This is the voice of freedom, Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre. Welcome to your next lesson with hosts Fitzroy and Carl.
Well, when we say Fitzroy and Carl, we don't mean Fitzroy tonight. And, well, we've got a very special guest. Thank you for joining me again. If this is the second time you've joined me in the last few hours, really appreciate it. Tonight, after a great day at South Morang, and can I just thank everybody at South Morang today. Thank you for everything, all your kind words, the donations that you put through. But thank you most of all for standing up and wanting to stand up and create something great. Australia is needing this community spirit. And tonight it'll be interesting to hear from our guest just how that's playing. So we'll have some news for you. Developments. There's been some big moves since we went off the air. So I'll leave that to the end of the show. Tonight, I did say, if you're a Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre fan, tonight is reasonably special. Normally we have Fitz on the phone, and he's able, as everybody knows. In fact, I call him our alien because he is able to express to us the logic and the term behind Magna Carta 1215 in a way that is very difficult back against when you're being honest with yourself. He's not the only one of these special aliens floating around the world. Tonight, I'd like to introduce you to a guy who works very closely with Fitz, or should I say Fitz works very closely with him. Now, Will Keyte is an Englishman. He likes to call himself a weird little Englishman. He used to be a teacher. These days, he's very much focused on constitutional law. And in the UK sense, they couldn't get much closer to Magna Carta 1215. So I'd like you, ladies and gentlemen, to welcome to the show. Will, very much for joining us. I know it's early in the morning in the UK, so thanks for coming on board.
It's great to be on, Carl. Thank you.
So I've got to ask you, how did you meet Fitz? How did you
I'm just trying to remember. I think what was happening on that day, I typically don't tend to use social media. I stay well clear of it. I'm a little bit old-fashioned, as I explained to you just now in that way. And but my other half actually was on Facebook or something, and she happened to come across Fitz, who was quoting me, I think, or something, or pushing one of my videos or something like that. I can't remember. So she told me this, and I was just in the room reading or something with her, and I said, "Oh, well, say hi to him." So, and she did, and I think Fitz was just a bit blown away, and she said something like, "Oh, Will's just sitting with me here now," and so it's a lovely moment. That was a good one actually. So yeah, I think that's how it happened anyway.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from the other side of it, when he rang me and said, "You've got no idea who I'm talking to. You've got no idea who I'm talking to. I'm talking to Will Keyte. I'm talking to Will Keyte." And I said, "You're right. I've got no idea who you're talking to." It was a beautiful experience for us as well. So thankfully, he has introduced us, and we've had the opportunity to have a bit of a chat previously to tonight, and we had set up. We're very keen to sit down and talk, and a lot of people here in Australia have asked, what is the relevance of Magna Carta 1215 to Australians? It's really an English thing. And in fact, I've had somebody tell me as recently as the last few days that, well, if we really look into it, the Magna Carta doesn't exist either. So there are a variety of views, a variety of stances taken on Magna Cartas, or is it Magna Cartae? I'm not quite sure.
Good question. Certainly in the plural.
Yeah.
Yes.
So without going into the arguments of twos and fours and why fours, I would like to get into deeper aspects of common law as we are all discussing it. Doesn't really matter what you're basing yourself on at the moment. The biggest problem that I see currently with the common law proponents here in Australia, and I suspect you've probably got similar types and similar approaches in the UK. The biggest problem that I see is we have no mechanism of enforcement. Our mechanism for common law seems to be having meetings, deciding to go and attend rallies, wave placards and flags, scream a bit, and go home.
Yes.
Can you explain to me how the common law mechanism works or should work?
Yes, absolutely. And it's important to state that our constitution was indeed set up to protect our liberties quite correctly. It is real. It's the real deal as far as I'm concerned. And the rule of law of our respective countries is very much based on a common law system. So our constitution is fundamentally a common law constitution. And one of the problems that I'm finding is that when people start to engage in a discussion on common law, they very quickly, within a minute or two, start talking about something completely different. In fact, what they actually start to talk about usually is some form of admiralty or law merchant or even uniform commercial code, which was written much more recently as a sort of a variation, I suppose, on the commercial laws. And they don't talk about common law, and they don't talk about the mechanism itself that's built into our constitution that uses common law and how it uses it. All they do is point out the sort of the weird technical systems that they, the other side, have developed, and think that it's really our job to unpick all of that technical aspect to somehow prove it. And I actually think that that's a distraction. I think that that's a problem. So specifically, I'm talking about the story of the straw man and all the rest of it. It's not that I don't think that that is true. The problem I have with it is that I think it's a distraction, and I think it's very hard to prove with a high degree of proof. It's a difficult thing. I mean, even if you're quoting, say, for example, Professor Carol Quigley in Tragedy and Hope, and you know, the insider historian Carol Quigley even talked about Colonel Edward Mandell House raising these issues about making the people chattels and so on. That's a fairly good standard of evidence, but I still wouldn't regard that as good enough. I think to go off on that one and start using that stuff. What we really should be doing is holding our establishment to account under the system of law that they are meant to be held under. And the only way we're going to do that is more people understanding the Constitution and asking bloody awkward questions of our establishment. And not enough people are holding them to account. So that's what we probably need to do today. So, I mean, yeah, I can go into the mechanisms of the Constitution and lay that out pretty quickly now. I think you guys are already experts, actually, so you probably already know, but I'll certainly do that.
No, very keen. Can I ask you, Will, not that we're distracted at all by your wonderful face, but our connection is a bit limited at the moment. And I think while we're moving around and all that, we're straining it a bit. You're dropping in and out. So would you turn your camera off, leave your microphone going? Were you able to just bring that up, and we'll see if that improves the connection at all? I can do the same for mine now.
No problem. I'm just wondering how to do that on mine. Yep.
If you go to there, you go.
Hear me, right? Yep, that should be right.
I can. Good. Beautifully.
Good.
All right. So, step one in the mechanism of the Constitution.
Okay, so yeah, let's go through those mechanisms, and I suspect that that you guys are well up on this anyway, because you and Fitz are experts too, and your listeners obviously must be well informed already on this. So that's great, but it would be good to step through it. So the mechanisms of the Constitution are extremely concealed information. There seem to be very few people, even in what I would broadly term the freedom movement, who know about this. And even within what you might call the anarchist movement, those who are really understanding individual rights and understand the true nature of rights, and when you're getting more deeply into natural law. So we might be talking about people like Mark Passio and Larkin Rose and others. I would say that these great people, and they really are, by the way, and this is not a criticism of them because I've learned so much from them, but I would suggest that even they don't know about this information, the mechanism by which the English common law constitution actually binds government and elevates the people into that supreme position, that supreme authority, allowing them to rule genuinely their own community. That's in a sense what the constitution, the English common law constitution, is allowing people to do. So what's the first one? The first mechanism that you guys will be well aware, of course, is the authentic version of trial by jury. And although many will know, of course, that trial by jury supposedly happens today, it's not a genuine or common law trial by jury. It's not functioning in the way that it should be. But the key to this is jury independence, because there is a second purpose to the jury, extremely concealed and hidden, which is that they not only judge the accused, but they also judge on the justice of the law itself. And by the law, of course, what we mean in that context is government-created law or legislation. So what that means is that the government legislation is essentially being placed before a jury every single day and being tested by the country. Okay, so the country is a representation. The jury, I should say, is a representation of the country, and it's being put before them. And the jury has the independence to judge on that piece of legislation as well by judging freely, ignoring it if they feel they need to. And delivering the verdict is independent of the legislation. And few people know about this. And we'll get onto this maybe later, in that the establishment is not keen to inform the people that they have this power. So that's the first mechanism, and that's pretty jaw-dropping when you think about it, because it does actually place the people in the ultimate authority over their own government. Because if the government is creating legislation which then gives them the opportunity to punish for wrongdoing, actually what's really happening is it's the people ultimately deciding whether somebody is to be punished or not, and whether that piece of legislation is to be regarded or not. And that's a pretty powerful position to put us in. Very few people know that. Go on, sorry.
How are you finding educating people on the trial by jury system in the UK? I mean, everybody is familiar with being called up for jury duty. Trial by jury is a very different thing, and Fitz and I have been trying to get people educated towards the 4 tenets of 1215, which essentially cover all the 10 commandments. It's not that we get pushback from people. I would call it more almost a cognitive dissonance.
Yes, it very much so.
So you're experiencing the same thing in the UK?
Oh, absolutely. No question. It's slow. It's slow going. It's very strange, because it's not necessarily that people are you're right, that are averse to that knowledge. It's the more they are close to the establishment and to a position of authority, that's where it becomes a problem for them. Because really, as you know, and perhaps we should get onto this a little bit later, because that's going to sort of open up some broader concepts to do with statism in the conventional sense, the idea of authority, the illegitimate concept of a government authority. And people are very comfortable within that. They want to be told what to do, because people are inherently within a state of fear. And I mean, this is opening up a whole can of worms, but yes, there are a lot of people who are very comfortable in that understanding that they can be told what to do by an authority figure, and they trust that authority. That's still the case even now. And many people who are closer to being in the establishment system want that to be the case. So what we found in some fairly deep research, which I can't claim to be doing it, but somebody else quite close to me has been doing some very deep research into this, and senior members of the judiciary are struggling with this. Definitely, there is a double think that is going on, where on the one hand they admit that the people have the power to be independent in the context of the jury. But at the same time, they say that they don't want to inform people. Otherwise, wait for it, we would have anarchy. So the irony of that statement is absolutely staggering. So that's what it is, and you're absolutely right. It is basically a double think. It's a mental condition, in fact, I would argue. But this is a bigger theme that we probably want to get into a little bit later. But yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, continuing on with the mechanisms then of common law.
Okay, so
what is our next step?
The next step, I suppose, is understanding that the head of state, the king or queen, if we want to go back to the English Constitution, is the senior public servant. They are only to be seen as that, nothing more than that. Rather than the sort of divine right of kings tradition that came a bit later, which those in power would have us believe. Actually, the further back you go, the closer you get to that limited monarchy concept, in which and we've got to be careful with the word monarchy. Actually, I mean, I slip into that one every now and again as well. But the king or queen is there as the senior public servant, and they have limitations placed upon them, very much so, and that was definitely the case even prior to Magna Carta. Leading up to that time, the late Saxon kings, Edward the Confessor, Alfred the Great was well known, of course, for being a great king, but very much in that context. So where am I going with that one? So, because what that really is about, the head of state in that context, being the public servant, is really the ultimate protection for the liberties of the people. And they have an important mechanism in which they take part, which is the not only royal assent, which is providing that assent to legislation that comes from the legislature, Parliament, but they also must, and this is more important, they have the right and the duty to refuse that royal assent if it appears that any legislation coming from Parliament may infringe on our constitutional freedoms and rights. And that's a problem, because that has virtually disappeared, really because of they've put it out there that in a sense that whilst it's doublethink again, whilst the king or queen might have the power to do it, they wouldn't do it, of course. It's frowned on. It's so you've got this doublethink going on again. And in fact, Queen Elizabeth didn't. Obviously, we've had a little bit of turmoil in our country over here recently, as you know well.
Yes,
you too. In that, she actually didn't, I believe, once refuse royal assent. And that's a problem. So she didn't do her job, sadly. Depending on how you look at Queen Elizabeth and the royal family, and obviously many people have some big concerns over that. We can get into that a little bit later as well, if you like. But there are a lot of people in the freedom movement that are sort of screaming and shouting about getting rid of the monarchy. The problem with that, and it's a very dangerous thing to be calling for, actually, because that role is absolutely fundamental for our protections under constitutional law. Our existing mechanisms that bind our governing system, if that was taken apart, we'd be in real trouble. We'd be very exposed. So that's important. So that royal assent is absolutely key. And the House of Lords over here, which is our upper house of Parliament, is often misunderstood as well, because that was very much meant to be a group of people who are in longer term office. And this is also often misunderstood, this idea that, and it links up with a topic that I want to talk about later, or maybe I'll just deal with it now. which is the aristocracy in England. It's misunderstood often that the aristocracy were just simply a bunch of rather privileged elite that were kind of lording it over everybody else. And that's actually a mischaracterization of the way that was supposed to work. Because the whole point of the aristocracy was that you were effectively creating a stratification in society, a layering of society in which you were allowing a system to be in place where, regardless of how senior you are or how influential you are in society, you would always be able to be judged in a court of law by your peers. And what that means is by suitable people who understand your context, your pressures, your temptations in life, who are in a similar context to yourself. And of course, that includes the king or queen as well. So the king was really the first among equals, if you like, within that upper layer. And it was important that he also had people around him who would be his judges and would be able to be his peers and judge him in just the same way that we would. And that was the point of the aristocracy, really, in the context of a common law system. And that's exactly what happened in 1215. If you think about it with Magna Carta, is that the peers of the realm, the barons, were essentially convening a common law court and judging the king for appalling crimes.
Yeah.
So that's a different way of looking at it. Now, going back to the House of Lords, excuse me, that's a similar thing in that the lower house, which is our House of Commons, is absolutely filled to the brim, of course, with fairly sort of short-term people who've been, elected into office and pass out again into fairly lucrative positions within, business, within industry or whatever. So you've got this dangerous situation developing where they're putting forward legislation that might actually assist maybe the sector that they might be going into. You can see how all the backhanders work, and we know this well. This is the sort of thing that's going on all the time. So the point of the upper house, certainly in England, was to create a title, a series of titles, landed people. Now, what that really was providing was people who have long-term responsibilities, who were not going to be able to be bribed as easily. They had reputational concerns in which their family over a long period of time were going to be, potentially judged for their long-term position, their work. And they weren't going to be easily swayed by sort of fairly transient concerns of what was going on in the lower house. So that was the point of the longer-term offices of the upper house in the legislature. And so if you think about it, as you go up the layers, you've got the House of Commons at the bottom, you've got the House of Lords, which is the upper house, and then you've got the monarch as well. I must stop using that term, keep doing it. The king or queen as the head of state. Yes. And that was really how the Constitution is supposed to work, is that, these things get passed up and there are plenty of checks and balances along the way to throw out any legislation coming from potentially a criminal government. Because this is what people forget, is that government itself can be a criminal too. And that's often missed. And the whole point of the Constitution is to provide us with protections from government itself becoming criminal in nature. So I cannot emphasize that enough. So that's pretty much it. I mean, there are other mechanisms too, but those are the most important things. But trial by jury is the key one, because that's the people directly ruling their country. Very much as occurred in early Athens. It goes right back to then. Exousia writes in the time of Cleisthenes. That was how democracy really developed. And so this term democracy is wrongly attributed to voting in elections. It's really nothing to do with that. It's actually more to do with the people being the final arbiter of law on a jury trial. That's really the primary mechanism of democracy. So there you go.
You mentioned the jury trial or the trial by jury process there once again. People would argue that we have pretty much what you outlined already with people of the community judging those sitting on a trial or sitting on a jury. In Australia, and I'm not sure if it's happened in the UK, but in Australia, I personally know of 2 people who have been not allowed to take their particular matter to court.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, indeed.
Now, even if you can get to the court, you're not going to get a jury trial because they're not allowing you for some reason. I thought it was everybody's right to have a jury trial under the current system.
Absolutely correct. Yes, and so that causes us to come to the fairly straightforward conclusion, I'm afraid, that summary trial, which is what we call the magistrates' court, is really fundamentally unlawful. It's unconstitutional, because you're quite correct. Everyone is entitled to be judged by their peers. So that's a big problem, and we think it's somewhere around sort of 1% that of cases that actually reach a jury, and that's a massive issue. So clearly, that's one of the reasons why jury trial is not working, is because if only 1% is actually getting to it. I mean, there are other reasons too. There are other distortions that have happened along the way. Rattling those off very quickly, it's to do with the idea of perhaps the jury not being able to decide on punishment. Other things to do with whether or not everybody in the country is entitled to be on a jury. That's something that we have to look at carefully. It's not literally everyone. It's people who of sound mind, and but essentially everybody should be entitled to be on a jury. So there's potential problems there too. There are a number of issues where there's been a whittling away of jury trial, and the fact that people don't understand that they do actually have this power to be independent of the legislation, and they don't have that explained to them explicitly, is a massive issue. So that's a big problem. Yeah. So there's a lot of legislation. I mean, in fact, there's another interesting point, I suppose, you can glean from this, which is that given the fact that so few cases are reaching jury trial, what's actually happening is that the legislation being created by government that is most in need of being filtered out and tested is the legislation that doesn't get before a jury, and that's the biggest problem. So those cases that do get to a jury quite often are actually run quite well. They're actually, and in fact, the legal profession, contrary to what a lot of people in the freedom movement think, there are many in the legal profession that actually love trial by jury. We've got to be a bit careful about overly criticizing those in the legal profession, because many of them just don't know. It's been educated out of their minds, but many of them do actually like trial by jury. They're very pro it. So anyway, yeah.
Continuing on with the mechanisms, then, in a common law constitution, we've been through the start, the middle, if you like. What is the end process? Do we need to start talking about the Constitution, and potentially, I don't know, is rewriting the Constitution with people's input something that is even possible? How do we step forward? Because the mechanism is failing us at the moment.
Yes, it is. And it's really been, excuse me, it's been done by force. It's de facto, really, because the other side, are simply relying on the fact that the people in large enough numbers simply do not understand and don't have that clarity of understanding what the government's limitations are. See, that's the key, really. What we're really needing is a firm understanding in much larger numbers in our society of knowing what the limitations of the powers of government are. And how would that be expressed? It would be expressed really in non-compliance. And the people can't be non-compliant in large enough numbers if that clarity and that confidence is not known. And so I often say to people that, because there are an awful lot of people in the freedom movement, I think, that are sort of wishing for a magic bullet and looking for sort of hidden letter processes, and yes, there are those things, and I'm not saying that they won't necessarily work. It rather depends a bit on whose desk it lands to some extent and who the enforcers are. So this is why you get reports back of it sort of sometimes working and sometimes not, and who knows why it's worked. Maybe they just got frustrated and decided to kind of drop it. I don't know. We don't really know. So there's an awful lot of sort of tall stories being told in the freedom movement, I think. A lot of exaggerations and wishful thinking. Yeah. And I think that's very dangerous. I think we have to be much more honest. And we'll get on to the honesty and truth as we get into it. But I'm afraid I don't actually think that there is a magic bullet. I think, and it stands to reason, the more you understand about natural law, and you guys do, I think, very much so, is this idea that it's bottom up, really. It has to be the people individually stepping into their power. And if we can't exercise our sovereignty in the context of a rule of law or a system that was actually set up to protect our liberties and is actually there to bind government, we're not going to do terribly well if we drop that. If we can't do it with a constitutional law that actually is meant to be there to do it, we're going to do even less well outside that system. So really, in a way, the solution is that we just absolutely have to ask more and more very awkward questions of the establishment, knowing law, understanding the Constitution, and firing these bloody awkward questions at them and asking, why are they not doing things that they should be doing? And why are they doing things that they shouldn't be doing? Here's the Constitution. We can prove it very easily. There's plenty of sources all the way through history on constitutional law that describe the boundaries in which they work. And we just need to be making a lot more noise about this. Our movement, specifically within this, the common law movement and the constitutional movement within the freedom movement generally, needs to be much bigger. But otherwise, we won't have a hope in hell's chance of getting what you might really call the normies out. So yeah, go on, Carl. Sorry.
What's our best way of trying to raise that awareness then? I mean, Fitz and I are doing what we can with these classes. You're doing what you can with your education process and the talk, the talks that you give around the country. Is that enough? Is it going to work fast enough? How long is a piece of string? I guess that's we can only go. I keep saying to Fitz, we can only go as fast as our slowest learner. Do you feel that that's the way it's got to be, or can we fast forward a bit?
I think it's achievable, but we've got to step it up. I was saying the other day to somebody that I think that the danger is that whilst the freedom movement is much bigger now in the last 2 years because of recent situations, I don't think it's as strong in terms of quality. There are an awful lot of people in the freedom movement now. It's been a bit diluted, and I think that it's been infiltrated as well to a large extent. When I think back sort of 10, 11, 12 years, it was a much smaller movement, less influential. We were really on our own, I think, back then. But people were there was much more humility, and we were treading very carefully and doing some very careful reading about what was going on. And I think that we've expanded, and the freedom movement has got bigger. So the weight of opinion is excellent, but I think that there is a lack of quality. So there's an awful lot of cul-de-sacs that people are going down, I think, sadly, that many of us went down about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago.
We did.
That sounds a bit arrogant, and I don't mean to say that, because we all went down those too. But I think that people need to have a little bit more humility. Those that are waking up more recently, I'm seeing some really quite brash behaviours out there in the truth movement, freedom movement generally. Quite a lot of arrogance, actually, and not a lot of humility. That really, in a way, and you guys get this because you understand natural law much more deeply, which is that the condition in which we find ourselves is to a very great extent caused by ourselves. not
Yes.
stepping up to the plate and dealing with things when it might have been easier to do so in the past, and having that courage, and being principled and understanding morality. And I mean, I think Fitz has talked quite a lot in your group about some of Mark Passio's teachings, and one of the things
Indeed, yes.
he talks about is the direct proportion of or the morality of our societies in proportion to the freedom that we experience in our society. And although the normies would think we're perfectly free on the surface, we all know that we're not. And there's a really nasty encroaching situation. And things are being clamped down. And you guys have had it worse than us, I think, over there more recently. And that's an indication, really, of our morality in society. And we're getting into, this is where we're getting into the sort of the deeper aspects to do with how we as individuals operate effectively as sovereign beings. So we're getting into a deeper subject.
And that is the problem. That is the problem. If we are not deep enough as human beings to stand up and start working this solution, how are we going to be able to understand that step that you just outlined? How are we going to be able to motivate people to take that next step?
Yes,
I think that's
you're absolutely
the next
right.
issue,
It is very much the issue, and it's actually something that happens at the same time. So one of the great things about the Constitution is that it has a transformational effect. So the very effect of being on a jury is transformational in itself. And there's plenty of studies actually out there to show this as well. It's very deep, very self-reflective. It causes you to draw on our deeper selves. It forces us to confront prejudices. There's a lot of shadow work in if you like, that's going on for jurors when you're carrying out that judgment of your peers, and that is a very deep transformational thing. So the very enacting of our Constitution, the taking part within it, you are in effect practicing for anarchy, if we want to use that term properly. You guys will know that the real meaning of the word anarchy is exercising our masterfulness over ourselves. No external rulers. We have to take responsibility and be our own masters in a responsible way. That's what anarchy is being, and that exercising the Constitution causes us to have to do that and to do it. So you learn as you go. If we were really to exercise our Constitution, we would be constantly improving as a society in morality as well. So that's an important aspect. It's pretty deep. So we're practicing anarchy, I would say, in that respect. I suppose one other thing also to mention, actually, and this is something that I have been bit of a journey that myself I've been on, and with my other half as well, who's very up on law as well. She also talks about this with me a lot, which is that we think that the Constitution is really, in a way, a container for our anarchy to be, because a lot of people have what you might call true anarchists out there. What they want to be, they have this great enthusiasm to be stateless, truly stateless, as in we don't have borders and boundaries to our countries. But increasingly, I'm coming back to this idea of being within a state. Now, whether we call it a state or a nation, the expression of being a country with borders and a nation is actually, in a way, a divine masculine expression, if you like, of the safe space. It's a masculine container. And we're getting in some quite deep stuff here. But it's actually very necessary, I think, that you have those boundaries, those safe masculine boundaries. And the Constitution is an expression of that. And within that, we can be anarchist, truly anarchist in nature. Yeah.
there is a large conversation happening at the moment. Well, maybe not large. Maybe I'm imagining that it's large, but certainly in the circles that I'm moving in, there is a significant conversation about what comes next constitutionally on that piece of paper, because we do not believe at the moment that they are working to that constitution. The constitution is flawed in a variety of ways. Have you given any consideration to how we, either as a Commonwealth or as independent nations, move forward and would put together a new constitution?
I would be very careful about that. That worries me a lot, because we're certainly not in a position to do that now. Because if if we're already admitting that a very high proportion of the people within society don't understand the fundamental nature of the constitution that was in place to protect our liberties, the idea of us rewriting something, I mean, that's just a vacuum. And the other side would love that situation. So the more that we call for a new constitution at the moment, the greater the dangers, I would say. What they really don't want on the other side is to be held to the constitutional limitations that are already placed upon them. They're loving the situation only at the moment, only because we don't understand it and we're not holding them to account. But they are bound by it. They are bound by it in perpetuity.
Our understanding of it, though, is that at least the 1901 Constitution is flawed in a number of places, not least of which is the fact that it is in part based on the laws laid out in Magna Carta, but one from 1297 written by a Catholic Pope,
yes,
not even part of a Commonwealth, let alone our Commonwealth. So
yeah.
the bastardization of the constitutional process happened well before the Australian Constitution came into being. And the Australian Constitution was essentially the English Constitution with a few different words. That leads us to the referendum, I guess, that the Australians voted on to accept the Constitution, and the benefits of referenda, if you like, in this process. Have you got anything you'd like to add there?
So I'm glad you asked that question, Carl. You're absolutely spot on, and I sort of missed that, actually. I was thinking I must make sure I include this. So the distortion, there's been a lot of confusion and obfuscation caused by the other side about what is constitutional law. And I need to clarify this, because there's a lot of trickery that's been done here. And in fact, in our group over here, there were some emails crossing backwards and forwards with people talking about constitutional statutes. And this is where we have to be absolutely clear in our understanding of this. And it's perfectly logical. When you really break this down, you understand it's pretty clear, actually. The government itself can write legislation that is statutory law. They have the power to do that. And the true nature of that statutory law in its limited powers comes from the fact that they can amend and repeal previous legislation. So a subsequent government can always amend or repeal legislation that has gone before. Now, they would claim that that isn't the case when it comes to what they call, in inverted commas, constitutional statutes, which, by the way, that doesn't exist. They just call it that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what they've tried to do through history is to imagine, and it probably is an imagining on some of their part, I suspect, that they have the power to create law that binds future governments. And they don't. So no law that they can produce can bind future governments. And that gives you the indication of the limits of that law. But we know constitutionally that there is law that binds government itself. Because otherwise you've got to, that in my talks, I've often asked that question at the beginning is, can government do anything it likes? Well, it would be an
Yeah.
utterly absurd answer for anyone to suggest that government can do what it likes, because quite frankly, it would be 50 years in existence, government, and already it would be an absolute tyranny. You know, I mean, the very fact that it's taken 800, whatever it is, years now for government to reach the power that it has now is quite obviously down to the fact that they've struggled along the way and trying to whittle away at the limitations placed over them. So there is constitutional law that is placed over them, and they can't rewrite that constitutional law. And using statutory law through Parliament does not allow them to change the Constitution, even if they call those statutes constitutional statutes. And the reason, by the way, why they do call them constitutional statutes is down to what they call the implied repeal. And I suspect that you have the same mechanism there too, which is this idea that normally speaking, when a statute is proposed and it contradicts in some way a previous statute, then in a sense it effectively repeals that previous statute to the extent that it contradicts it. Okay, now normally they would flag that up in the statutory law and make a note, and you'd be able to see what that it would be flagged up. But where they don't, and they sort of miss it, there is the understanding that there is implied repeal in the sense that it would contravene that previous statute. Now, what they've tried to do, and they've done this quite a lot more recently around the EU law, is to put a mechanism in place into a statute that gives it extra power or some sort of provision that causes the earlier statute not to be repealed impliedly by a later statute. So it gives it extra protection, if you like. And I think they've called those constitutional statutes. And that's the problem. Now, going back to what you specifically talked about Magna Carta 1225, Magna Carta 1297, both of those were examples of government attempting to rewrite what was essentially constitutional law in statute form. And what that really did was cause their own egos to be to be expanded somewhat. But it was actually treasonous. Yes. You shouldn't be doing that. They can't rewrite constitutional law in statute form. Okay, but of course, what it allowed them to do was then attempt to repeal parts of that Magna Carta, in inverted commas, causing everybody to think that the Confirmatio Cartarum, which is the 1297 Magna Carta, is no longer in operation. It's not there. It's not on our law books anymore. So we can dismiss that. It doesn't. What they don't realize, of course, or do, depending, is that the 1215 Great Charter, which is constitutional and is made up of the Articles of Common Law, is very much binding on them still. And that is a bombshell for them. And you can point it out logically. I mean, you couldn't deny that. It's pretty obvious when you explain all of what I've just explained. So that I just wanted to clarify that is it. People need to be very careful in starting to make claims that government itself has the power to write itself into constitutional law. It doesn't, and it can't. Legislation is fundamentally limited under a number of mechanisms, not least trial by jury, but also under the royal assent thing as well. So, just wanted to clarify that one.
Mate, it's been an amazingly interesting chat so far. I'm having some connection issues with hearing you. I'm not sure if the rest of the world is hearing you as clear or clearly. So if I stumble and fall here a little bit, it's simply because I've probably missed a bit of what you've already said. I'm sort of encouraged a lot by what you're saying, but I'm still worried about how we, in Australia, I've probably been a bit rough on Australians. I'm sort of of a bit of a mindset that Australians are very happy-go-lucky people. She'll be right, mate, is almost our national saying. And apathy, I think, I don't want to call it laziness. I just want to say I think it's apathy that many Australians suffer from. It's too hard to learn Magna Carta 1215. It's too hard to learn natural law. Why don't we just not do whatever the government tells us not to do and be happy?
Yeah.
Is that a mindset in the UK?
Yes, it's very similar everywhere, isn't it? I wouldn't say that. I mean, you guys over there are a wonderful bunch. You are very happy-go-lucky, and that's great. And that's a real, that's a good thing. That's that's fantastic. But you're right. I mean, we're all bad at lying to ourselves and not having that courage and it's just the same problem over here. And I'm sure we're just as bad as you guys over there. So no, you don't need to feel bad about it. But yeah, it's a serious problem. What isn't a serious problem is learning the Constitution. Learning the Constitution isn't difficult. When you think about it, the mechanisms just boil down to the fact that the people have the authority over government legislation and can rule themselves and can, rule on legislation, on the justice of that legislation independently. It's down to us. You can, the people govern the country through the jury. Put it like that. It's pretty easy. You can say, you can define the Constitution in one sentence like that. And we need to get to the point where we can express it like that, really, and get and have that practice at expressing it in that way. Is that the government is not a government really at all. It's an administration. They're all public servants. They all fall under the authority of the people and under the jury. The petit jury of 12 is the supreme legislature and the supreme judiciary, and the people govern themselves through the jury. There's so many ways you can put it, but once you understand the concepts, it's really quite easy. And I should just point out actually that if you want to understand it in 5 steps, I hope I haven't got it wrong. I've only just did it the other day actually, but on the New Chartist Movement website, newchartistmovement.org.uk. The first thing on there actually is 5 steps to understanding the Constitution. And I've sort of gradually over time been getting better and better at kind of breaking it down into simple terms. So I've done that. I've just put it up there as 5 simple steps to understanding the Constitution. Do that, and then the very thing below that, I think at the moment, in the top of the news bit is another link to a container page for downloading my PDF, which is a statement on the Constitution, a much longer statement. And don't shy away from it, people. It's 13 pages, but 13 pages isn't very long. It's 13 pages absolutely laying out what the Constitution is about. And I've gone in that document. I've laid out a lot of what I've talked about in today's interview. And it's a PDF you can download. It's about 13 pages, and it's called The Occulted Powers of the British Constitution. There's that word occult that people like to shy away from. Just means it's hidden, and it's very concealed. And this whole thing about the word occult, and people really got to grow a backbone and stop being, and I always say to people, and by the way, I'm not against Christians, but they are the worst at this. The occult, we don't want to go there. Yeah, but actually the information that they've hidden from you is called the occult. So if you're happy to go on having that hidden from you while they have a power differential over you, be my guest. But the condition is going to continue if you do that. So we have to look at occulted information. They've hidden it for a good reason. So we have to know it. What's dangerous is how you use it. That's the key. And so those of us who've dipped into natural law will know that that's the case. Sorry, go on, Carl.
That's all right, mate. I've just put a question up, or a statement more precisely from Auslander. Switzerland has an interesting concept in place where the people can, via referendum, have their say on any legislation or even introduce legislation. Every election is also a referendum day. Now, Switzerland's known for a lot of things: secret bank accounts, Davos, a whole heap of interesting things.
Yes, and we need to cover the sort of the ultimate expression of suffrage, not democracy, which is voting. So the ultimate form of voting, which is a referendum, is actually repugnant to the Constitution, it's actually quite dangerous. And people would be, on the whole, quite shocked to hear that. But if you think about it, just putting things out to the majority vote, a referendum is just a worse version of that. And I would
I would argue that society is doing that now with Twitter.
Yes, absolutely.
And social media, certain social media platforms.
Yeah.
This is how the people are being manipulated through the algorithms, through the brains behind these things. And they're doing just that, I think, don't you?
Yes, I do. I think you're absolutely right. And I think it needs to be what needs to be brought up in people's minds is the danger of the majority thinking. Because the danger of the majority thinking is all that is the perceived authority, or the truth as most people on the surface think that it is really just the lazy man's thinking. You know, most people will get to an opinion on something through a fairly lazy, quick route. They won't go under the radar and calmly explore difficult truths. And quite often we think what we want to think. So the opinion of the majority is often not necessarily the truth. That's a very dangerous position to take. To think that the opinion of the greater number is automatically going to be closer to the truth. That's a really dangerous assumption to make. So actually, referenda is far worse. That it's a really dangerous position. That
I've been looking into the quantum realm, quantum computing, quantum phones, all things quantum, if you like, as we move forward into that realm. Quantum phones, quantum computing will allow complete security. It'll allow instant interaction. So a government or a country's leadership can effectively put things out in real time and get answers in real time and know that can't be cheated or reframed in any way.
Yeah.
But once again, having a quantum phone or a quantum computer will not ease the problem that you've just outlined.
Absolutely correct.
We are making emotional decisions, or what I would refer to as an emotional decision, on something that cannot be emotionally based.
That's really interestingly put. You're absolutely right. You can't think and reason with your emotions. And so when you whimsically put a question like that to the people, they're not going to be exploring it deeply. And that's, of course, the whole point of the jury, is that you're putting the behavior of the accused to the test, and you're searching for mens rea in Latin, which is what you might translate as malice aforethought. And that takes time. That takes all kinds of exploring. As I said earlier, it's about confronting your own prejudices. It's about inner work and going through shadow. So the truth is found through an exhaustive process. It's not found by just asking somebody on a moment's notice, what do you think about this piece of legislation? How does that make you feel? That's not really going to get you a good answer. Whereas a jury, which is a cross-section, very small, obviously, a representation of the country. But you think about the meticulous examination that they are going through. I mean, I think I describe it in that downloadable document as a sort of almost like a science experiment. You're putting the justice to the test, examining it in a petri dish. You're absolutely kind of that meticulous examination that's going on with the jury. Whereas any kind of suffrage where you just whimsically put it to the nation or put it to people, no, not good news, not good at all. And so this mind control that's happened on us about majority voting. In the UK, if you think about the whole party political system, really only emerged in the 18th century, sort of mid 1700s, was when political independence became more of a rare thing, and the parties emerged, and so it's a very recent thing. So to think that democracy is really made up of something that's only really emerged in the last 250 years is absurd. The whole idea of democracies, it went back to ancient Greece, and of course the real democratic mechanisms are really about the jury of what we described on this. Nothing to do with voting or numbers, or the opinion of the majority. It's not about that at all. Yeah.
So we've spoken for an hour. I think we've given a pretty good outline of the processes as are currently available to us. We in Australia, we're trying to, as part of what I'm doing with Voice of Freedom, is trying to join communities together. Now, I don't really make people go and do Magna Carta 1215 Learning Centre courses or anything to be part of our community.
Sure.
Community building is, I believe, the biggest way forward. We need to help I said to the gathering that I was with today at South Morang, just north of Melbourne, that it starts with your neighbour. And if you know that neighbour, go to the one across the road that you don't know, or the one on the other side that you don't know, or the one behind you that you don't know. And then if you do know all of those, go to the ones you don't know down the road, around the corner. Build this community. You're allowed to have differences. And God knows, in the common law community, we have differences. Now, one of those differences is named Mike Holt, who we had on our show the other day with Fitz. Mike has a way of doing things and a certain belief system. Fitz was very, I thought, gentle in explaining our position, and it felt at the time that Mike was at least open to what we were saying and investigating more. We found this to be a great plus. It remains to be seen what really will come out of that. I'm looking forward to seeing something in the next few days, maybe. And in your part of the world, you too have others who are fighting against you. Now, this division in the common law society is both unhelpful but extremely confusing.
Yes.
How do we pick the common law we're going to follow, or we're all going to push? Otherwise, we are simply going to tear each other's movement apart, and we'll achieve nothing. We'll remain where we are.
Well, the common law is really about principle. It's less about codifying specifics. It's about defining the principles of our governing system and our rule of law. Common law is about defining the fact that the jury is the supreme authority, and that's written into 1215 Magna Carta, as you know well. So common law is really about that higher form of law and principles. It's not about codifying specifics, and that's a very good point. In fact, I think Fitz was very keen. He mentioned to me that he really wanted me to include that, and maybe that's why you asked me that question, Carl. Actually, is the concept of the bad man, as it were. The bad man in society, the immoral individual, prefers codified law because it causes them to be in a position of being able to see how they can get around it. Whereas the moral man is the one who actually prefers principle, and that's quite a deep concept. And in fact, I'm just trying to think who it was. I think it was an American judge. I'll think of the name maybe in a minute. But anyway, he was the one who coined this idea that I'm sure others have too, actually. But it's the bad man concept, the idea that the immoral individual very much prefers codified law, and will cause that law to be shaped much more. So common law is really about the principles, and it's about the fact that common law fundamental mechanism of trial by jury allows us to go on, in a sense, creating that common law. It's not necessarily in written form, but the decisions of juries, in a way, is more common law because it's in alignment with our consciences. I wouldn't say that common law is quite natural law. A lot of people sort of talk about the fact that it's the same thing. I don't think it is. Common law is an interpretation of natural law that is fundamentally built into the universe. And one would hope that that common law that we, those decisions that come out and are written in the principal documents of our Constitution, really are an expression of the way we want to live and our consciences. And so, yeah, it's still a sort of a man-made law, but it's us. It's made by the people rather than government. Government-created law is the dangerous codified law that we've got to keep an eye on. So, yeah, so I don't think there's a danger. Once we focus on what common law is, we don't have to get all technical about it. It's really just making sure that the common law mechanisms are understood and are in place, which is trial by jury, understanding that the head of state has that mechanism and must, and by the way, they are required to enact that and to protect the liberties of the people. And if we fire this at the establishment noisily, and we've got hundreds and hundreds of people, and hopefully eventually thousands and thousands of people, all making these points and asking bloody awkward questions of our establishment, I think it's game over for them. We've just got to be a stronger people and understand and care about our Constitution and do it. Yeah.
This sort of leads us back to the starting point this evening. We get to enforcement. So the people, we can try to hold government to account, but we've had our mechanism of enforcement stolen from us.
Yes.
How do we fight back?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is starting to get very noisy on social media with memes and provocative statements, things that trigger people to question and expose those contradictions within people's minds. I think that's the only thing that we can do, and I think we could do it very quickly if we're effective at it. It's in a way, it's sort of a sort of counter movement to the 7-7 brigade that we have over here, which is sort of actually meant to be a military, a semi-military operation, but is actually acting online as a kind of mind control system. But we need to be countering that. We need to be effective at causing people's lies to be exposed within their own minds, noticing the contradictions so that people see the doublethink. We're pointing out that doublethink in people's minds. That's the key. And until we do that, people are not going to be starting that reflective process. And people might be out there thinking, oh my God, this is going to take us ages. Well, it might do. I don't think it actually will take as long as people think once that really starts to develop. I think we need to be cleverer at this and start re-expressing the constitutional principles in slightly provocative sentences. Whether that's in the form of questions or provocative statements. That's my feeling. I think we could use social media much more effectively.
Well, I do not wish to sound disrespectful in any way, but by fighting this with provocative statements and memes almost sounds like a Monty Python script to me.
No, I think that's the only way that we could do it, actually. Because what you've got is people's heads in the sand. They don't recognize their own contradictions. And until you do that, until you spot the illogicality of your prevailing thinking, you're not going to be on that journey. You won't have started it. And you know from looking at natural law that until you start that process, it's not going to happen in people. In I don't like using the word normies, but the people out there who don't see the conspiratorial nature of our reality, they're not even on the journey yet. They're not even started. It's beginning to happen. It's pretty damn slow. But, that's my feeling, is that until we get much larger numbers really throwing statements around, asking really intriguing questions, that's what fires people up. That's what's going to get people going. And then providing them the content to look back to click back to, so that you can put this to them. I think it doesn't have to take that long. But I think it could work, definitely. I think it will. It's got to work, and I feel pretty positive about it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And once again, without wishing to dismiss or sound in any way insulting toward your concept, I believe humour
Yes.
is a great leveler.
Totally.
Well, unless you're speaking to Americans, because they don't understand the British or Australian sense of humour. But
Irony. Yeah, absolutely.
but thankfully we understand theirs, or Big Bang Theory wouldn't have been as big as it was. So humour is a great way of exposing, like you say, the people that we don't like to call normies, but who are less exposed to what we would term the truth than others. Is humour our way through? Is that the most piercing spear we can use? Because humour can be both entertaining but extremely cutting.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, totally. Yeah, I know. There's the irony of humor is fantastically effective, and I agree with you. And yeah, no, the Americans are some of them are really good on that as well, actually. But I know what you mean.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
They struggle a little bit more, I think. But the Australians.
Well, did you ever watch the American version of Ab Fab?
No, I know the thing you mean. I vaguely remember. Yes.
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 Never good.
It's just absolutely. Yeah, there is a less of a tendency towards using that, but the Australians and the British just can be very cutting and great humour, absolutely brilliant. But I agree with you. I think that's really effective. Must be used.
Thankfully, we are really referring to English or common law, but through Magna Carta, it's an English thing. So hopefully the Commonwealth has our sense of humour. Hopefully we can motivate enough people that way.
Well, the people do. The more recent powers that be I think have tried to get rid of humour because they don't like to be laughed at. You know, people who are doing something surreptitiously behind people's backs don't like humor. They don't like to be made fun of, and yeah, absolutely right. It's got to be done. Got to be used. Definitely. Yeah.
I like this comment from Auslander about John Cleese. Very interesting character indeed, and he's definitely hit the nail on the head more than once. I think another example of using humour to point out the stupidity of what the world has been through in the last 2.5, 3 years.
Yes, absolutely, and making people confront how they've gone along with it as well. When many of us have been screaming from the mountaintops, there's a very serious side to it as well. But humour, of course, can bring out the black, as we know well. The fact that an awful lot of humanity have committed the most appalling crimes just simply by going along with stuff, and that's part of the lies, isn't it? The fact that So yeah, we can be very black humoured about that kind of thing. Definitely, yeah.
How do we just to wind up? I don't want to steal your entire Saturday morning off you. How do we unite our brothers and sisters, cousins in arms in the Commonwealth? How do we make this what you're doing, what Fitz and I are doing, what others are doing? How do we make this a Commonwealth-wide thing?
I think that's a really good thing that you're raising there, because I've been, in fact, actually just recently, my situation's changing a little bit, my circumstances, which is going to allow me, I think, and probably others too, to kind of get together a little bit more. I've actually been a little bit off the radar within the last year and a half. Yes, I have been on the circuit speaking a bit in the past. More recently, within the last year and a half, it's been more difficult. I just haven't had the time. I have a day job as well, and my circumstances are such that I haven't been able to give this the time that I really are desperately keen to do so. But I think that's about to change. I'm linking up with others over here more so. We should be linking up. You guys over there with me. Yeah, and I can see that.
Do we have a Canadian colleague?
I don't have any one person at the moment that I'm talking to. There are people that I can connect with out there, and we should do that. I mean, they're seriously going through it too. Maybe
a conversation, if either of us can get to him, maybe a conversation with Mark Passio.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
a global look at all of this.
I've been reluctant so far to talk with Mark Passio because I wanted to get my own knowledge up and running before catching, because I have an awful lot of time for him. I think he's got some of the most valuable information out there. He and Larkin Rose. I also think there's a gentleman I'm watching quite a lot at the moment called Thomas Sheridan, who I like very much as well. I think these people are great. I think they have so much to teach us. But interestingly, I also think they have missed the concealed nature of the English Constitution as well, because it does allow us to enact our anarchism, if you like, within that safe framework. But yeah, absolutely. No, Mark Passio is a top man for putting out the information that he does, and doesn't get gets a lot of grief for it, I think, as well. It's not nice information to be putting out. That's why it's called the great work. When you speak on natural law, it's not an easy subject, and people don't kind of grab it with both hands. But that's the nature of these things, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. Will, thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule, out of your day today. And can I just express my condolences for your recent life journey. You've been fairly tied up for the last couple of weeks. So
yeah, because we were going to link up, weren't we, a couple of weeks ago? But there's I'm organising a funeral for somebody in my family at the moment. But it's one of those things. We all go through that, and absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah.
Would love to have you back again, and I'm sure Fitz is champing at the bit to get talking to you again as well. Next time we might even invite him on. I would like us to be able to work closer together with your group. I would like us to expand together to include others, and see if we can't begin this journey in other parts of the Commonwealth or other parts of the world. I do occasionally some radio stuff in America. The Americans are very open, at least the ones that are listening to the channels I'm talking on are very open to Magna Carta. They do understand that they are still covered by it.
Very much so. And they actually talk more openly about jury nullification over there, which is great. There's a large part of the freedom movement in America that doesn't understand their constitution, just like us over here and you guys over there. But no, absolutely, that's fertile ground too. So absolutely. And well done, Carl, for what you're doing. I mean, great to you guys. And clearly your listeners are really up on this material too. So it's been a pleasure to be on. So keep up the great work. Fantastic. Thank you,
mate. And we're happy to help you anytime you need it. And just so you know, we are being inundated is a strong word, but there are a number of very, very great expressions of interest for the 3-day Magna Carta 1215 courses that Fitz and I run. When I say 3-day, that sounds like a hell of an endurance. They're only 2-hour lessons. So
wow, great stuff.
Trust me, you'll walk out with your head spinning after 2 hours, but you'll be back the next day to get it respun. And
great, excellent.
And by the end of it, if you're feeling up to it, we'll help you take the oath as well. So it's all about trying to get people aware enough so that when the opportunity presents and we can hold trial by jury, we have trial by jury jurors who are able to judge the case on the merits as laid out under our auspice, rather than the system that's currently so corrupt and is simply there to extract money from you. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thanks again, mate. Thanks for coming on tonight or today for your time. And I'm sorry it was a little bit late. I'm traveling around the country at the moment. I've done 2,724 kilometers in the last few days.
Oh my goodness.
And put shows on most nights along the way. So, it's been a wonderful journey. I love this great country of ours. I've probably driven around England 3 times in 2 days by the sounds.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, we don't quite have the mileage that you guys have, but that's very impressive.
Well, I expect to do somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 kilometers before I get home. So we've got a lot of shows. I'm heading off to Tasmania next week. In fact, we're doing a week's worth of Magna Carta education, Fitz and I, in Hobart, or just out of Hobart, next week. So starting I begin in Hobart. I begin in Penguin on the 29th. Lovely little town called Penguin. Go and look that up. You'll get a smile. And then heading to Launceston and Hobart for Magna Carta and a couple of live shows down there too. So people are very interested in hearing how this works, and we are obviously not charging for any of this. It's all free information. So maybe that's something that that you guys might be interested in looking at in future. And Fitz has certainly got the paperwork. We might be able to help you out.
Amazing. No, that's well. Good luck to all of that stuff that you're taking part in and doing. That's amazing. So yeah, keep up that great work, Carl. That's fantastic.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, Will. And once again, thank you for taking the time tonight.
Not at all. All the best to you and your listeners.
Cheers.
Take care.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, there you go. I'll put my head back up. So there you go. Thank you very much to Will for coming onto the show tonight. Thanks to Fitz for organising it. Fitz will be back again Monday night, 7:30, for our next Magna Carta 12:15 Learning Centre event. What else is going on in my world? Well, great show in South Morang today. Tomorrow we were meant to be doing our show from Shepparton, but unfortunately, due to the weather modification and the huge amount of rain, Shepparton is currently cut off and undergoing emergency flood conditions. We weren't sure that we were going to even be able to get in there tomorrow. It looks like that wouldn't have happened anyway. So we have relocated to Frankston. We were going to be here for Darren Bergworth's My Place on Wednesday and again on Friday. Turns out we're going to be here tomorrow. And tomorrow is a market day. So if you'd like to see how My Place community market works, then hang around. From a bit after 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, we will go live from the Frankston Community Markets at My Place in Frankston. I've had a little look at the place today on the way in. That's why I was a bit late. And it's a spectacular venue. And some of the amazing things that Darren is putting on there, really, folks, I'm really looking forward to bringing some of that to you tomorrow. Really, really exciting stuff that he's doing. And on the back of what we did today in South Morang with explaining how My Place is put together and how you can have a My Place at your place if you happen to have a shed or a building or something you can use. It's not very difficult. So see for yourself tomorrow. We'll hopefully take it on the road a little bit. There is a bit of rain expected in Melbourne tomorrow, and I believe a top of 16 degrees. Woohoo! Anyway, there's a reason I moved to Queensland. I probably should have left all the hair on. My head would have been warmer. But I do have a Cali beanie as well as a Cali jacket floating around somewhere. Thanks, folks, for watching tonight. Spending your Saturday night with us is, well, I consider it an honour. So thank you very much for the time that you spend with us. Thank you. I saw a super chat donation go in there before. Thank you very much for that. Thanks to everybody who's putting in and helping and support, and the emails that I'm receiving. I've got to admit I haven't read many of them today because I've just been so flat out doing things. But I will go to bed very shortly, and I will start reading those. The ones that I've read already are just wonderful, and thank you for the kind words that you say. I am not doing anything I consider to be special. I talk. That's what I do, and it seems a few of you don't mind what I'm talking about. So that humbles me. And the people that I've met today, the people that we've met every time we put a show on, I'm never cease to be amazed by your generosity, by your love. And I'll tell you now that this journey has, not this particular journey, this one to Melbourne, but the previous one to Singleton and this particular journey have changed my daughter's life so wonderfully. She had lost faith in humanity after the things that had happened to her and been perpetrated on her in the previous few years. And I was very scared of losing her. This community we have has given her love and acceptance and trust of humanity back. You people have given her that. I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you enough. You've given me her back. It's changing both our lives. So, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Now, I've cried 4 times today. I'm sick of it. I'm really sorry. I don't know why I'm so emotional. I'm overwhelmed. Thank you, folks. Thank you very much for everything. And I can't wait to bring tomorrow's Frankston Community Markets from my place to you. I'm so excited to be able to show you what we can do together. I'm so excited. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night. And if you're on the roads, avoid the dickheads, hey?
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Let's ride!